I thought I could handle it. I told him to leave. I said I was okay. But when I heard the noise coming from her room down the hall, soft, rhythmic, undeniable, I couldn't just lie there. I rose, walked quietly down the hallway, and pushed the door open. And I saw them, my partner and her, like that. Neither flinched. They simply looked at me and continued. Before we dive in, please take a quick second to like this video and hit subscribe. It's a simple way to support the channel, and it helps more than you know. I appreciate you being here. Now let's get into it. I was gripping the edge of the worn quilt, fighting to stay still, as Ethan moved behind me with a focused rhythm. My hands bunched the fabric, heat building rapidly. Each breath escaped louder than the previous one. Ragged, impossible to suppress. His grip on my hips tightened, holding me steady as I spiraled further out of control. A sound tore from me, sharp, abrupt, too loud for these thin walls. I barely recognized my own voice. Then he shifted me onto my back, pinning my wrist gently above my head as he kept his pace. The old bed frame groaned beneath us. I tried to breathe evenly to remain present, but the world dissolved into sensation. My free hand reached for something solid. The wooden headboard tapped against the wall in time. I pressed my lips tight, but another sound broke free, raw and uninhibited. When he finally collapsed beside me, I lay motionless, heart hammering, skin slick with sweat, chest heaving hard and fast. He let out a low chuckle, brushing his lips against my shoulder blade. You know, Maya definitely heard that through these thin walls. My stomach plummeted. I sat bolt upright, the quilt tangled around my thighs, eyes fixed on the dark hallway outside our open door. I had completely forgotten she was here this weekend. I was the one who insisted she come to the lake house with us after her separation, that she shouldn't be alone. I knew she'd been finding it hard. She hadn't been intimate with anyone since it ended. Not from lack of desire. She just seemed lost on how to start over. And now she'd heard everything. The sounds, the movement, the way I utterly lost myself. It wasn't just embarrassing. Felt unkind. I stayed there frozen, pulse still frantic, for entirely the wrong reasons. How could I possibly face her over breakfast? The next morning, I lingered in bed much longer than usual, scrolling meaninglessly on my phone, trying to convince myself everything was normal. It wasn't. My voice from the night before echoed in my mind, louder than it ever should have been. And I couldn't shake the thought of what Maya must have heard. Eventually, I forced myself toward the kitchen. She was already seated at the rustic table, sipping coffee, appearing serene. Her phone rested beside her, a spoon in her other hand, as if nothing was amiss. "Morning," I mumbled. "Morning." I opened the small fridge and pulled out the apple cider, avoiding her gaze, pretending to be intensely focused on pouring a glass. Then she spoke. "Sounded like you two had a wild time last night, huh?" I paused, cider jug in hand. "Yeah, we were a bit loud, I suppose." She smiled faintly. "A bit. Honey, I think the whole lake house probably heard." I shut the fridge door, blinking rapidly. "He must be pretty incredible," she added casually. "You sounded like you were having the experience of a lifetime." I offered no response. "You're fortunate," she continued. "It's been ages since I've had a night remotely like that." She took another slow sip, then her eyes met mine. "If he ever needs a change of pace, feel free to point him my way for an evening." I laughed nervously because it felt like the expected reaction. But her expression didn't change. She just held my gaze, and suddenly, it didn't feel remotely like a joke. The day drifted onward as if nothing significant had occurred, but the weight of Maya's words pressed down on me. Every time I walked past her closed bedroom door, I wondered if she regretted saying it, or if she truly meant it. That night, we were back in our bed, just talking quietly. No physical contact, no playful touches. Just the gentle drone of the ceiling fan overhead, and the warmth of his arm resting near mine beneath the quilt. He glanced over at me. "So, how was your morning?" I hesitated. "Strange. She brought it up. She said something?" I nodded slowly. She mentioned we sounded like we were having fun. He smirked slightly. We weren't exactly quiet. I ignored the comment. Then she said you must be really good. He lifted an eyebrow. Oh, really? And then, I paused. She said if you ever get bored, I should send you her way for a night. He blinked, clearly surprised. Wait, seriously? What? That's what she said. I confirmed, nodding. A beat of silence. Then he let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. Well, she's not wrong about the second part. I turned fully to face him. You find her attractive? I mean, yeah, he admitted readily. She's striking. Just older. I stared up at the ceiling fan's slow rotation. She hasn't been with anyone since the split. I think she's more lonely than she lets anyone see. He remained silent. I exhaled slowly. Would you ever actually do it? He turned his head sharply. You're being serious? I don't know. I keep replaying it. She said it so nonchalantly, and then just looked at me like she meant every word. He studied my face a little longer this time. You'd genuinely be okay with that? I hesitated again. Not entirely, but the idea. I'm not dismissing it either. The room fell quiet once more. Then he pushed himself up to a sitting position. I looked at him, questioning. What are you doing? He glanced toward the bedroom door. You said you weren't dismissing it. I hesitated. Right now. He nodded once, decisively. Unless you've changed your mind. I didn't reply. He leaned down and kissed me softly. Just once. Then he stood, pulling the quilt off his legs. She's probably still up reading. He turned toward the door. Wait, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You're actually going? He looked back at me. Only if you let me. I didn't say a word. And then he walked out into the hall. The latch clicked softly as the door closed, and I was alone. The air in the room still held traces of him. Residual warmth. A faint, indefinable scent. Something that made the sudden quiet feel suffocating. I lay there clutching the quilt to my chest, every nerve ending hyper-aware, painfully awake. I shifted slightly, trying to find a comfortable position to calm my racing thoughts. But the stillness only amplified everything. I told him it was okay. I told him to go. But now that he was actually gone, something about the silence felt unbearable. Then I heard it. A soft floorboard creak from down the hall. A quiet rustle of fabric. And then a breath, drawn in sharply, unsteady, and definitely not Ethan's. There was a pause. Then another sound. Her voice, barely audible, hesitant. Then longer, rising slightly in pitch. I held my own breath, listening intently. Something was happening. I remained frozen, wishing the sounds would just stop. They didn't. Instead, a slow, deliberate rhythm began to emerge. Quiet shifts in weight. Soft thuds against a wall or headboard. A low murmur now and then. No distinct words. Just sound. Intimate. Focused. Unmistakable. Then I heard him. His tone was low. Steady. Measured. Reassuring. And that single sound was all it took. My hand drifted downward. More instinct than conscious choice. Pressing firmly over the heat already pooling beneath the thin cotton of my nightshirt. The response was immediate. An ache, sharp and familiar, blooming fast through my core. I let my eyes drift closed, trying to stay present with the sensation, trying to breathe through the tension coiling inside me. She cried out again, sharper this time, less inhibited. My fingers moved with growing urgency, tracing insistent circles over the same sensitive spot. But it still wasn't enough. My legs shifted restlessly beneath the quilt. My body arched subtly, moving in slow, involuntary waves I couldn't seem to control. I pictured them just down the hall on the other side of the thin wall. Her body pulled against his hands moving lower, exploring. Her voice rising with each deliberate motion. The rhythmic creak of her bed. The catch in her breath. The way she surrendered so easily while I was still here, chasing an echo of something I'd already willingly given away. Each sound, each imagined touch, dragged me further into the escalating tension. but the release remained elusive. It circled closer, almost there, then slipped just beyond my grasp. I pressed harder, not deeper, just chasing that critical edge, hoping I could finally catch it before it vanished again. But the internal pressure only intensified. Everything inside me wound tighter with every ragged breath I took. And then she cried out again, loud, broken, completely lost in the moment. That was it. I threw the quilt off, my breath catching in my throat as I sat up abruptly, skin flushed and pulse pounding a frantic rhythm behind my ribs. My hand fell away in frustration. I couldn't do this alone. Not while hearing those sounds. Not while knowing exactly what was happening just steps away. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stared at the closed doorway. For one long, suspended second, I stayed perfectly still, trying to decide if I was actually going to follow through. But the answer was already humming in my veins. I stood up, and I walked toward the other bedroom. I opened her door and stepped inside without announcing myself. Maya had leaned forward near the edge of her bed, hair tumbling around her shoulders as Ethan moved steadily behind her. One hand resting firmly on her hip, the other tracing the curve of her spine in perfect time with their shared rhythm. The small room pulsed with sound, staggered breaths, the subtle impacts, the quiet friction of skin on skin. They both glanced toward me as I entered but didn't pause their movement. Maya turned her head slightly, eyes meeting mine between shallow, rapid gasps. "Joining us?" she asked, her voice breathless and tinged with amusement. "Or just watching?" I pulled my nightshirt over my head as I crossed the small room. My pajama shorts slipped down my legs easily, joining the shirt on the floor, leaving a small trail behind me. By the time I reached the side of the bed, I was already flushed and acutely alert. I stepped in close behind Ethan, letting my hand run down the long muscles of his back, then sliding around his waist, my palms coming to rest just above the base of Maya's spine, feeling the connection. "Just keep going," I whispered against his shoulder blade. He didn't verbally respond, but I felt the subtle shift in his movement, becoming more deliberate, more intensely focused. Maya's breath hitched, her arms trembling slightly as she braced herself closer to the mattress, her voice catching softly in the back of her throat. I pressed a light kiss to his shoulder, then traced another down the smooth slope of Maya's back. My hands skimmed lightly up her sides, fingers tracing gentle, inquisitive lines as I leaned in, keeping my body intimately close to both of them. All three of us moved as a single unit now, the rhythm established between them now encompassing me, sinking beneath my skin. "That's it," I whispered softly against her ear. "Stay right there," she whimpered, barely audible. I smiled faintly, then I leaned in again toward Ethan. "Let's ease her back." He slowed his rhythm, pulling away just enough to give her space to move. Together, we gently guided her onto her back, her body shifting fluidly beneath our combined touch. Her legs adjusted without hesitation, finding a new position, her chest rising and falling rapidly with each quick breath. He leaned into her again from the front while I slid onto the bed beside her, brushing the damp strands of hair from her flushed face. He leaned into her again, his movements steady and smooth, and her breath caught sharply midair. I kissed the sensitive skin on the side of her neck, my free hand drifting along her collarbone and then lightly across her center. Her body responded instantly, arching subtly to meet his thrusts, her hands gripping handfuls of the sheets beside her hips. "You're still with us?" I murmured, brushing my thumb across her cheek. "Good." She turned her head toward me, lips slightly parted, her eyes low-lidded and glassy. I kissed the sharp edge of her jaw while Ethan picked up his pace beside me. One of my hands remained at her waist, providing a steady anchor while the rest of her moved freely between us. He eased away gently after a moment. We shifted her again, carefully guiding her onto her side, facing away from me. I moved in close behind her, my arms slipping beneath her waist, wrapping her tightly against my body. He adjusted his position, lifting one of her legs carefully before resuming his deep, steady rhythm, his motions instantly syncing again with hers. She gasped aloud the second their bodies reconnected. I kept one arm firmly around her middle, my other hand supporting her upper thigh, holding her steady. Her back pressed intimately against my front, her breath growing shorter and more ragged with every powerful movement. Her voice rose and broken, incoherent pieces, scattered and urgent. "She's trembling," Ethan observed quietly, watching her reaction carefully. "Stay with her?" I whispered back, my lips close to her ear. His motion deepened, not necessarily faster, but more certain, more intense, and her fingers curled tight into the bedsheets. Her sounds grew sharper, more pointed, her chest lifting off the mattress in quick, uneven pulses. I held her tighter against me, trying to ground her as the electric tension wound tighter and tighter around all three of us. Her entire body suddenly tensed, locking up, then stilled completely for a beat, her legs rigid, her breath seemingly vanishing from her lungs. And then the sound came, utterly open and raw, echoing in the small room as she collapsed fully into my hold, every part of her body shaking uncontrollably as the built-up tension finally, violently snapped. I felt her go completely quiet then, her body melting bonelessly into the space between us. I held her firmly, one arm tucked protectively around her ribs, my face near her ear as she struggled to catch her ragged breath. Watching her come apart like that, held securely between both of us, hit me with an unexpected intensity. Ethan slowed his movements behind her, lifting himself away with deliberate care. We stayed close for a long moment, the three of us tangled together in residual heat and charged silence, the undeniable weight of the moment still thick and palpable in the air. I gently brushed the damp hair from Maya's face and kissed her softly, just above her cheekbone. She turned her head toward me slowly, her eyes still low and glazed, a faint, languid smile touching her lips. "If you two ever need a third again," she whispered, her voice husky, "I think I'm definitely available." And that's where we left it for the night. Most partners wouldn't even entertain the idea. He didn't just entertain it, he followed through. So tell me honestly, if your partner asked you to do the same, would you? Would you go into that other room? Or would you refuse and walk away? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I'll definitely be reading them. Before you head out, don't forget to like this, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications by clicking that bell icon so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.